Ever since the UFC 4 trailer dropped yesterday, there's been an ever-trending question going on in the comments section, which is, what about Fight Night? Why is EA Sports continuing to make the UFC games over the Fight Night boxing games? And one common answer people give is that UFC or MMA is a much more lucrative and popular sport than boxing, and that boxing is dead. So therefore, that's why UFC games are being made instead of Fight Night. And I'm making this video to provide actual factual facts to debunk that claim that boxing is dead, one, and two, MMA is so much more popular than boxing, so it only makes financial sense. And the main point of the video that I'm going to talk about right now is the bottom line. And what I mean by the bottom line is if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. So we're going to go over the financial sales totals of each of the EA Sports combat games within the last decade. And we're going to also compare it to Fight Night Champion to see exactly where the numbers lie on the popularity of the UFC combat games versus the Fight Night games in terms of sales numbers. So we're going to start off with Fight Night Champion first, which came out in 2011 on PS3 and Xbox 360. And the PlayStation 3 version sold a total units of 1.13 million units sold, with the Xbox 360 version at 780,000 units sold, combining for a total of 1.91 million. And honestly, I don't know if that number is actually accurate because I believe that that's not counting the increase of Fight Night Champion units sold ever since its re-release on Xbox One. So honestly, I think you could bump that up to 1.94 or 1.95 million depending on what those numbers show. Anyway, right now we're going to go with 1.91 million as the total amount of units sold for Fight Night Champion. And then in 2014, with the release of the next-gen consoles, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, we got EA Sports UFC making its debut on next-gen consoles. The PS4 version sold at 1.11 million units, and the Xbox One version at 480K, which means that UFC 1 tallied in at a total of 1.59 million units sold, which is less than Fight Night Champion. And then we've got UFC 2, which arguably is the pinnacle of the series, and the numbers actually show this. And personally, it's my favorite in the series. UFC 2, which came out in 2016, sold 1.31 million units on PS4, and on the Xbox One, it sold 610,000, combining of a total of 1.92 million sold of UFC 2. And when you compare that to Fight Night Champion, it's at 1.91 million, barely, and I mean barely, beating over Fight Night by the skin of its teeth. And once again, we don't know the combined units sold after Fight Night's re-release on Xbox One. So it's very well possible that Fight Night Champion has also outsold UFC 2 when we factor those numbers in. Moving forward, UFC 3, which came out in 2018, hit an all-time low in numbers at 970,000 units on PS4 and 440,000 units on Xbox One, totaling of a combined sales of 1.41 million, which is almost a 500,000 less than their previous entry of UFC 2. So basically, UFC 3 is the low point of the series. And with the way the fan feedback has been with UFC 4, it's possible that they may sink to an all-time low. Because I hear the community really has a problem with the graphical fidelity of the game. it looks like a previous gen game, where Fight Night Champion honestly looks like a better game, if I'm being quite frank with you guys. But the point that I'm trying to make is that UFC, in terms of the sales numbers, has never been this big, much more lucrative and superior popularity than boxing. And the numbers show it. Because Fight Night Champion has outsold almost every single UFC game, despite it being a 9-year-old game. And if we're really talking about the current state of the UFC gaming series itself, in terms of EA Sports UFC, right now we're on a downward trend for that series. From the drop-off from UFC 2 to UFC 3. And am I really supposed to believe that UFC 4 is going to meet the standards of what UFC 2 met in sales? I doubt it. It could change, yeah, sure. And for them, maybe it will. But I don't think so. Especially given the feedback that it's been getting from its own community. So that being said, when people want to try to bring up the fact that boxing is not more popular than MMA, it's not really the point. The point is that boxing makes just as much, if not more money than MMA. So you can't use that as an excuse as to why EA is not making another boxing game, because the numbers speak for itself. UFC barely can even keep up with Fight Night in terms of sales numbers, and only on its best day can match what Fight Night Champion did on its best day. I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction for you guys, and you can hold me and quote me to this, that I don't think that UFC 4 is going to outsell Fight Night Champion. The truth is that boxing is very much alive, and boxing is in high demand. And if you don't believe me, let's take a look at the UFC's most marketable fighter, their most highest earning fighter ever, which is Conor McGregor. In Conor McGregor's last 2 fights, he made up to a total of $6 million, about $6 million. And with his total career UFC earnings, he's earned about $15 million in his career fighting in the octagon. And let's compare that to one fight that he had with Floyd Mayweather in a boxing ring, where he made $30 million in one fight. So let's do the math here. Conor McGregor makes $30 million in one fight versus his total UFC earnings, $15 million for his entire career. Let's do the math here, people. That's a 200% increase that Conor made just by fighting in the boxing ring one time. And why is that? Because boxing prints money. Even today, you can look around everywhere and see that. Whenever there's a big whoever fighting, Deontay Wilder, any big heavyweight, any big name, all the celebrities come out to a big boxing event. Boxing is forever. And outside of prostitution, boxing is probably the oldest profession in history. So the fact that people want to bring up the popularity of boxing is not there anymore is BS, because the money is in boxing and the money is also in Fight Night. So EA Sports, I hope, goes back to their books and look at those total sales numbers and then really outweigh the pros and cons and the positives and negatives. Because from what I'm seeing, UFC is a downward trend and still is not yet been able to meet the gold standard of Fight Night Champion in 2011, which has outsold almost every single UFC game, and at UFC's best barely breaks even. So once again, we're back to the age-old question. Yeah, we know we're getting a new UFC game. That's good for them. But we need to ask the important question of, what about Fight Night? EA Sports, it's time to come to the table and have a real discussion. Because according to your own bottom line, to your sales numbers, The Fight Night franchise still holds a lot of value and a lot of equity, therefore printing a lot of money. And that's what this comes down to, EA, is the money. I've shown you through my own channel and through my own content promoting this game that there's value. And Fight Night Champion continues to grow as a legendary game. And it's a shame that you guys have not been able to build upon that legend, because we all know that you're capable of doing it. Brian Hayes, I hope you're listening. We are ready for a new boxing game. Please, let's come to the table and have this discussion. Because it's time that you stop making excuses, EA. The numbers speak for itself. The Fight Night community is willing to spend and put their money where their mouth is. And the UFC series is on a downward trend, and on its best day can barely match what Fight Night does. The numbers speak for itself. I didn't make this up. So for anyone that goes and tries to say that UFC makes much more sense because it's a much more popular sport than boxing and boxing's dead, point them to this video, because the facts speak for itself and the dollars speak for itself. So to quote Ryan Moody, I'll be back in a week with more commentary, because this needs to be addressed and the pressure needs to be kept on EA to do the right thing and answer the question, what about Fight Night? See you soon.